Have you ever wondered if Wall Street has some kind of secret crystal ball? Well, in a way, it actually does. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on modern finance and look at how this thing called alternative data has completely rewritten the rules of investing. Let's just kick things off with a pretty wild claim. Hedge funds know exactly what you're buying before you do. I mean, that sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? But what if I told you it's not fiction? How on earth is that even possible?
Well, the answer isn't some big, shadowy conspiracy. It's actually a quiet but incredibly powerful data revolution. You see, the old way of analyzing a company, waiting around for their official quarterly reports, that's basically obsolete. It's been replaced by something much, much faster and way more predictive.
And that, right there, brings us to the core idea of this whole explainer. We are talking about the alternative data revolution. This is the engine that's driving this absolutely massive shift in the world of finance. So what is it exactly? Well, alternative data is basically any information that's generated outside of the usual financial reports. Our source material has a great way of putting it. Think of it as the digital exhaust of modern life. It's all those little data breadcrumbs we leave behind every single day. And the difference is just night and day. Traditional data like public filings, it's slow, it's official, it's like trying to drive by only looking in the rearview mirror. But alternative data, it's real time, it's super detailed, it lets investors predict what's about to happen instead of just reacting to what already did. So the big question is, where does all this data actually come from? Well, let's follow the trail. It's going to take us from satellites orbiting the planet all the way down to the receipts in our own wallets. Our sources break it down into three main buckets. First up, you've got sensor-based data, think satellites and things like that. Then there's corporate-level data, like shipping manifests. And finally, the one that hits closest to home, individual-level data. Let's start with the really big picture. I mean, literally. Let's talk about the view from space. The amount of information that can be gathered from satellite imagery today is, well, it's just incredible. And this gets so specific. We're not talking about some blurry images. We're talking about hedge funds using algorithms to actually count the number of cars in a Walmart parking lot to predict their quarterly revenue. They can even measure the shadows cast by the lids on giant oil storage tanks to figure out the global supply, often weeks before any official numbers come out. It's a truly staggering advantage. But hey, it's not all happening up in orbit. This data revolution gets a lot more personal. So let's zoom in from the view from space down to the view from your wallet. And yeah, this is where it can start to feel a little unsettling. Your digital trail, it's pretty much an open book if you know how to read it. Data companies sell what they call anonymized credit card transaction data, which tells hedge funds exactly where people are spending their money in real time. You combine that with bots that are constantly scraping prices from websites, and bam, you've got a perfect live snapshot of the entire economy. Okay, but here's the thing. Just having all this messy, unstructured data, the satellite photos, the receipts, the tweets, that isn't enough. The real magic and the real power comes from being able to find the valuable signal inside all of that noise. And this is where our source brings up this fantastic idea, the computational moat. Think of it just like a moat around a castle. It's this huge technological barrier that only the biggest, wealthiest firms can afford to build, and it protects their ability to make sense of all this data. So what's inside this high-tech moat? We're talking about some seriously powerful stuff. You've got natural language processing, or NLP, to read and understand millions of documents at once. They're even using large language models, the same kind of tech behind things like ChatGPT, to analyze the tone of a CEO's voice on an earnings call to figure out if they sound nervous or confident. The sheer scale of it all is just mind-boggling. So, all of this inevitably leads to a massive question. We've seen how it all works, but now we have to ask, is this really an unfair advantage? And this really is the heart of the matter. Does having this incredible foresight make our financial markets work better, make them more efficient? Or does it just turn the whole thing into a rigged game where only a tiny handful of players can ever really win? There are two really compelling sides to this. The people who support it say, hey, this leads to total efficiency. Prices reflect reality almost instantly, and that's good for everybody. But the counter-argument is that it creates a winner-takes-all market. It just constantly transfers wealth from regular, uninformed investors to this data-rich elite who always know what's coming next. It creates a permanent information gap. So where does that leave us? Well, it brings us to the new reality of finance today. We are looking at the market's new master. And here's the bottom line, the fundamental shift. Investing isn't really about judging a company's long-term value anymore. For these players, it's about mastering its real-time signals. It is a completely different game. So, to wrap this up, I'm going to leave you with this really powerful idea from our source material that just captures the gravity of this whole thing. The invisible hand of the market is now guided by 1 trillion lines of code, fed by the very receipts and images we generate in our daily lives. It really makes you think, doesn't it? When you're the one creating all the data, what role are you actually playing in this new market?